Hello and welcome back to the channel. On today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you a requested video of how to draft a monostrap inbuilt corset. So if this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. So first, I've gone ahead to mark out all my basic measurements just like we do. So if you don't know how to draft this out, you can just check on my previous video. So for the shoulder, I use my shoulder divided by 2 plus half because this pattern has sleeve at one side, and I went ahead to mark out all my basic measurements, my bust, under bust, waistline, and for my waistline I measured about 5 inches. So after I'm done doing that, I went ahead to just mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. So for the neckline, I used the standard neckline of 3 by 3 inches. So my nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5. So I'll go ahead to mark at those points connecting the line. So after that, I will go ahead to mark the darts. Now, if you're on a plus size, go ahead to use 1.5 inches. But if not, use 1 inch. So I'm going to connect from my under bust down to my waistline, and from that point I'm going to connect it down to the top length of my pattern. So this is what I have, and I will go ahead to use my marker to mark this out. So to draw out your curve, place your curved ruler or French curve, and you're going to connect from the bust down to the under bust of your pattern. And I will use my marker also to outline this. Next step is to go ahead and divide your shoulder into 2 and mark. Now I'll connect from that point down to my nipple to nipple at my chest line. And I'm going to come up by 1.5 inches. The curve is not so high, so you can also use 2 inches, and I will make a mark on that point. Now I'll be taking my dart intake of 1 inch at both sides. For a plus size, please go ahead to mark 1.5, or you can calculate it. I have a video also on how to do that. Now I'm going to connect from that 1 inch down to my bust line this way, and after I'm done drafting out, I'll use my marker to outline it. Now I'm going to use a freehand sketch to draw out my curve so that I'm going to get exactly what I want. So for my bust, I'll come down by 1.5 inches and go in by 0.75. We are not going in by half inch this time. I will go ahead and connect to that point that I need this way. So from here, you want to connect down to your under bust. So you want to connect from that point down to your under bust and make sure that that point, that 1.5 inches point is sharp, because it is also that way on the cup. So after I'm done connecting, I'm going to come down by 1.5 inches after my under bust, and I will connect this way. Now outline my bust line and go down and connect it. So this is what I have on this point. Now to mark on the other side, I'm going to divide what I have between the armhole and my bust circumference at that point, and I will connect, then go ahead to connect my cup. So if you don't understand what I did at that point, please check my other videos on corsets. I have a lot of videos on that, so you can just check it out. So now is to insert my measurements. I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. So you can decide to mark the dart here or the one on top. So I'm taking here because it's an inbuilt corset. You don't want to have too much allowance. Now at the under bust, I'll mark the under bust circumference divided by 4, which is 28 divided by 4. I have 7. Go ahead to measure the dart intake of 2 inches replace and add half inch for sewing allowance. At the waist, so you're going to snatch your waist for this particular pattern. My waist is 28. Snatching out 4 inches, I have 24 inches. The 24 inches divided by 4, I have 6. I will go ahead to mark 6 inches, measure the dart intake, replace it, and add half inch for sewing allowance. At the hip, I will mark my hip circumference divided by 4 and mark half inch. So sorry, this video is a little faster than my usual videos. I don't have a lot of space on my phone, so I'm trying to just make the tutorial short. So I'll go ahead to connect all my pattern and use my marker to draw it out. So next, I'll trace out the sides of my pattern, and I'm going to go ahead to alter the neckline of this pattern. So before that, whatever I have on this side, I'm also going to retrace it on the other side of my pattern. So here I have, next we are going to alter the neckline of this pattern. So from the neckline, I'll go in by 1/2 inch, and from there I'm going to connect it down to my cup this way, and after connecting that, I'm going to use my marker to mark it out. So I'm going to connect my two cups together and make sure that when I join it is going to match, and outline this part. So here is the one shoulder of the dress, and on the other side I'll connect the other cup, and I'll mark out the center this way. So here is the monostrap, and I'm just going to fold this over, and I will come up by 2 inches. So I marked 2 inches, but I later extended it by 2.5. Go ahead to blend in your dart this way, and I'll use my free hand to just connect it all the way. So this is my pattern. So you can use this as an inbuilt corset, but if you don't want, go ahead and cut it out from the waistline and create a bust from your waistline down to the lower part of your dress this way. So I'm just going to go ahead to cut out my pattern. So actually the length of my dress is 22, which is 5 inches away from my waistline. You can add 5 inches away, or 4 to 6 inches. It shouldn't be more than that if you're creating an inbuilt corset. So I'll just go ahead to cut the rest of my pattern, and before I cut out, I'm just going to go ahead to label my pattern. So if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and also I have a second YouTube channel where I do drafting illustration. So after cutting out my pattern, this is what I have. So here on my back pattern, I've gone ahead to mark out all the basic measurements, and for the neckline I used 3 inches by 1.5. So, and I also marked out all my measurements from my shoulder to bust, under bust, waist, and top length. So next, I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4 and add 1/2 inch for sewing allowance. Take it down to the bust point. What you have on the bust point is what you have on the chest line. I'll mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, add 1/2 inch for that intake, and I'm going to add another 1/2 inch for sewing allowance. So I'll be showing you why we added 1/2 inch that for the under bust. For the waistline, I'll mark the waist circumference, the waist measurement we used in front. Remember, add 1 inch for my dart intake, and I'll go ahead to mark 1/2 inch for joining allowance. At the hip, I'll mark the hip circumference. At my top length, I'll mark the hip circumference divided by 4 and add 1/2 inch for sewing allowance. Next, I'm going to go ahead to connect all my pattern from the chest line to the bust, to the under bust, to the waist, and down to my top length, and use my marker to outline it. So after I'm done doing that, the next step is to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. So my nipple to nipple is 7 divided by 2. I have 3.5. After I'm done marking my nipple to nipple, I'm just going to go ahead to connect it all the way down to the top length this way. So after I'm done doing that, the next step is to mark my dart intake. At the under bust, remember we added 1/2 inch dart intake. I'll mark that. At the waistline, we have 1 inch dart intake, so I'll be sharing 1/2 inch at both sides. So after that, I'll just go ahead and I will connect all the way. So even if you want to mark your dart before adding your dart allowance, you're still going to arrive at the same measurements. So now at the neckline, I'll just do a basic neckline design. That's not really necessary for this pattern, but I just wanted to do that in case you want to just use this pattern to draft out your basic corset. So I went down by 1 inch and I marked this out, and at the yoke I marked 0.75 to take that out. So next I'll be marking 1.5 all the way down. This is to mark your lacing bar. So I like using 1.5 because I don't want my back to be too open, but if you're okay with your back being open, you can use 2 inches or 2.5. So I'm just going to go ahead to rule a line at that point. So make a dot to indicate my lacing bar area. At the lower part, I'll go up by 2.5 inches, just like we did at the other side. I'll go ahead and I will really line that 2 inches. So I'm taking that line straight because for an inbuilt corset at the back is a little higher than the front. So I'll just cut it out and draw a straight line at that point. So before I do that, I'll just go ahead, mark 1/2 inch and slant this. This is to make sure that when you're lacing your corset at the back, that point won't be popping. So I'll just go ahead and cut out my back pattern. After that, we're going to go ahead to alter the neckline of this pattern. So I'm going to take the yoke of the front, place it on this. So remember we marked 1/2 inch. So you want to make sure that the front side is facing the front side of your pattern. If not, you might end up creating two wrong shoulders, like two wrong monostrap for your pattern. So I'm going to mark 1/2 inch here, and then I'll just connect it down to what I have on the other side. I remember the other side of your pattern is an off shoulder, so you won't be needing the yoke of one side. So this is my back pattern, and we'll be moving over to the next. So make sure that you cut out the dart line. For the skirt pattern, I'll be using my old skirt pattern, but I'll be explaining it in this tutorial. So for the full length of my dress is 34 inches because it's a short dress. So you have to start from your waist. So my shoulder to waist is 17 and 34 is my skirt length. So you're going to add 2 inches or 1.5 for your folding allowance. So I'm just going to go ahead to write that as my folding allowance. At your waist, you will mark your waist circumference divided by 4. If you snatched your waist, that snatched waistline is what you use for your waistline, and add your sewing allowance. Now at the hip point, you're going to measure about 7 inches down or 8 inches for a much taller person. So you're going to mark your hip circumference divided by 4 and mark your sewing allowance. For the lower part, whatever you have on your hip, let's say your hip is 40 divided by 4, you have 10 plus your sewing allowance 2 inches, that's 12. To make it a fitted skirt, you're going to minus 2 inches, that's 12 minus 2, you have 10 inches, or you can do 12 minus 1.5. So whichever way you want, and you're just going to connect it. So to cut the back pattern, all you have to do is to add a zipper to it. For this pattern, I added a zipper to it in front. If I fold it up, it becomes my front pattern. So when you're drafting for an inbuilt corset, for the back pattern, you go down by 1/2 inch at the zipper line and you will connect. This is to make sure you get rid of the bulginess, because when you lace your corset up, you notice the skirt is always popping up. This will take care of that. So I'm done drafting, and we're going to move to the sleeve part of this dress. Please, sorry, the pattern paper I'm using is a bit rumpled. So first you have to get the length of your sleeve. So the length of my sleeve is 22 inches, and I'll be adding 1 inch for folding allowance. After doing that, I will rule a line at those points. So next, you want to get your shoulder to elbow line, and you're going to start measuring from that line we marked, leaving 1/2 inch on top. So here's my elbow point, here is my wrist point. So after you're done doing that, you're going to measure your biceps round. Whatever you have, you're going to fold with it. So mine is 16 inches divided by 2, I have 8, and I added 1 inch. So next, we're going to cut out the curve on the sleeve. So you can go ahead to use your sleeve cap height, or you can just go ahead to use a freehand method. So I'm using a freehand method, and this is my yoke for the front and back. So I'll be using the back because it's a bit longer. So I'll measure what I have at the armhole this way. So I have 8.1 inch and sorry inches, and I'm just going to place and connect. So I'll just rule out what I have on that point. After drawing it out, make sure that you measure before you outline it. So this is a freehand method of drafting a sleeve. It is not a standard measurement. So after that, you're going to measure what you have around your elbow. Mine is 11 inches, and I will be adding about half or 1 inch depending on what you're cutting. If you're cutting a mesh, add 1/2 inch. If you're cutting an ordinary fabric, you can go ahead to add one. So at my wrist, I'll measure what I have. My wrist is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5, and I add 1 inch. So I'll take it down to my folding allowance, and I'll place my ruler to connect. Before you connect, at the upper part, make sure that you add ½ inch for your joining allowance. Then go ahead to cut out your pattern. So this is just a freehand method of cutting a sleeve. So for this part, which is an off shoulder, or you can just say a tube, the hand was just attached, so I just went ahead to cut out about 9 inches, and you can go ahead to mark 4 inches and make sure that you add your sewing allowance or turn up allowance to the pattern, and you're going to cut out. So with this, I'm done drafting this tutorial. Please don't forget to join us in our next video also, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button so you can add structure to this sleeve.